Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so I can tell more interesting stories. Now, let's get started. I never really thought much about dying, not in any serious way. Not until the moment I heard the unmistakable gut-wrenching snap of my leg. It sounded like a dry branch, cracking in winter, sharp and final. 1 second, I was descending the Ciula Grande in the Peruvian Andes the next. Well, the next second, gravity took over. I fell. It wasn't a graceful fall, if there even is such a thing. My crampons scraped against the ice, my hands clawed at nothing. The whole mountain seemed to lean in closer, like it wanted a front row seat to my disaster. The rope jerked tight, whipping me sideways, and that's when I felt the bone in my right leg snapping clean through. Imagine trying to stand on a broomstick that's been snapped in half. That's what my leg felt like. Not ideal. Not even remotely manageable at 20,000 feet. Somewhere in the back of my mind, a tiny voice tried to remind me that mountaineering has always been dangerous. Historians still debate whether early climbers were brave, foolish, or just chronically bad at hobbies. Either way, they rarely had rescue helicopters or GPS trackers. And here I was, in 1985, not much better off. The wind howled so loudly that it felt like the mountain itself was screaming. It's funny, when people imagine snow, they picture something soft, fluffy, and quiet. Nope. Up here, snow isn't snow. It's razor-sharp crystals, blasted by winds strong enough to sandpaper your skin. I shouted for Simon, my climbing partner, my lifeline, my only hope. Simon. But the wind ate my words, swallowed them whole. No reply. No figure appearing above me. Just endless white and the growing, creeping realization that I was utterly, catastrophically screwed. Lying there on the steep slope, pain firing through every nerve, I started doing the math. How far were we from base camp? Too far. How long would it take to descend with a shattered leg? Too long. Would Simon be able to get me down? Maybe, maybe not. It's funny, because earlier that morning we were feeling pretty confident, cocky even. We'd summited the Ciula Grande via the previously unclimbed west face, a route so dangerous that locals usually just shake their heads and mutter, "Gringos locos." Yeah, that was us. And for a brief moment, we were those guys, the crazy ones who actually pulled it off. I even remember thinking, this'll make a great story. Joke's on me, huh? It's not like we were reckless. Simon and I had prepared. We knew the risks. But there's a cruel little fact about mountaineering mountains. Don't care how prepared you are. They don't negotiate. They don't cut deals. While I lay there, gasping, a random thought popped into my head. Did you know honey never spoils? Archaeologists found pots of honey in Egyptian tombs that are over 3,000 years old. Perfectly edible. Not that it helped me at that moment, but the human brain is a weird place under stress. Pain sharpened, and I knew I had about 2 minutes before shock kicked in and made things worse. Simon was still higher up, carefully working his way down. I tried to wave but couldn't move much without sliding further. The slope was steep, maybe 60 degrees, just enough that one wrong move meant an unstoppable slide into a mess of crevasses below. I remember thinking, don't move, just hold on. When the Simon finally spotted me, his face twisted not in horror exactly, but something close. You can always tell when someone realizes they've got a massive problem on their hands. "Joe, what happened?" "Leg's broken," I croaked. Snapped. He didn't argue. didn't waste time asking if I was sure. The angle of my knee told him everything he needed to know. There was no quick fix, no splint, no morphine, no easy way out. Simon sat down beside me, staring at the mountain, the sky, the sheer drop below. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. We were 5 days into this climb. 5 days away from base camp. No radio, no backup team. No one else on this face of the mountain for at least 100 miles. Here's the fun part. Mountaineering ethics are a bit of a mess. Historians still debate whether leaving an injured partner behind is an act of betrayal or a grim necessity. There's even a term for it, the death zone dilemma. Above certain altitudes, helping someone could easily mean dying alongside them. But we weren't in the death zone. Not technically. Just an incredibly hostile, isolated slab of ice where broken legs usually mean broken endings. Simon didn't say it, but I knew what he was thinking. If he left me, he'd survive. If he stayed, well, it was a coin flip. All right, he finally said. We're going to try. I'll lower you down as far as we can go. Relief and dread hit me at the same time. Trying meant pain. Trying meant uncertainty. But it also meant not dying here like an abandoned bag of gear. Simon started setting up the anchors, threading the rope, testing each knot, with hands that were already raw and freezing. I tried not to pass out, failed, then woke up again when he yanked the rope taut. As I dangled there, strapped into a makeshift harness, one horrifying thought kept looping through my mind. What happens when he can't lower me anymore? I should have focused on the cold, the pain, or the mountain itself. But all I could think about was the simple, awful reality. Gravity doesn't compromise, and neither does the void waiting below. The rope hissed through the belay device, and with every inch I felt myself sink deeper into something that wasn't just fear. It was the absolute certainty that things could only get worse from here. Imagine dangling over an endless pit, one leg flopping uselessly, while your life literally hangs by a thread held by someone exhausted, freezing, and equally terrified. The snow kept coming sideways. Sharp, angry, needle-like flakes tore at my face. Visibility, maybe 4 feet. Honestly, I couldn't even see the end of my own boots. Not that one of them was particularly useful at this point. My busted leg swung awkwardly, every motion sending fresh bolts of fire screaming up my spine. Simon's shape faded in and out this shadowy blur above me, bracing himself against the slope, feeding the rope inch by painful inch. He shouted something I couldn't make it out. The wind stole every word the moment it left his mouth. For all I knew, he could have been yelling, "You're doing great, mate," or, "Sorry, Joe, you're totally doomed." Either would have fit. Lowering someone like me, dead weight with a broken leg, wasn't exactly something mountaineers practice for. The plan, if you could call it that, was simple. Simon would dig an ice axe into the slope, brace his body as an anchor, then slowly lower me until he reached the end of the rope. Then he'd climb down to me, set another anchor, repeat. Over and over. The problem, Ciula Grande's North Ridge, wasn't a friendly slope. No flat ledges. No cozy little shelves to rest on. Just a relentless drop, mixed with patches of ice snow and hidden crevasses that were basically nature's version of trapdoors. It gets worse. The rope was only 150 feet long. Doesn't sound short, right? Well, try descending a mile-long mountain face with it. It's like trying to cross the ocean on a pool float. Historians still debate whether this descent technique was madness, desperation, or a stroke of genius. Either way, it was happening. Right now, to me. About an hour into this nerve-shredding, muscle-burning process, something felt off. Simon had lowered me down about 130 feet, when suddenly the rope jerked violently. I slammed sideways against the slope. My broken leg twisted. I screamed so loud that even the mountain should have flinched. Then darkness beneath me. Not metaphorical darkness, literal darkness. I swung into empty space. The slope just disappeared. You know that feeling. When you miss the last step on a staircase, multiply that by 1,000 and add the sudden realization that the staircase has turned into a black hole. Simon up there couldn't see what had happened, but I knew exactly what was going on. I was hanging over a cliff. Worse, a crevasse, a void. Maybe 80, maybe 100 feet of sheer drop below me, swallowed by ice-blue nothingness. My one remaining foot kicked uselessly at the air. I waved an arm, felt nothing but freezing emptiness. No wall to brace against. No ledge. No chance. Simon, I yelled. Nothing. Not a whisper came back. Just the wind. The thing about crevasses, and here's your fun, mildly terrifying fact of the day, is that some of them can be over 150 feet deep and wider than a city street. Entire trucks have disappeared into glacier cracks in places like Alaska. Fun place, right? I dangled there like some broken marionette, spinning slightly, my headlamp flickering against the icy walls below. The realization hit hard. Simon couldn't see me. He probably assumed I was still hanging against the slope. But no, I was out of sight completely. And then horror layered itself like a terrible cake. The rope. It started slipping. Not fast, not yet, but I felt tiny jolts, like Simon was losing his grip, or the anchor was failing. In reality, Simon was dealing with his own nightmare. From his position, the rope led over a sharp lip of ice, then vanished into the abyss. He couldn't hear me, couldn't see me, had no idea if I was alive or dead. All he knew was that the rope had gone tight, stretched to the max, unmoving. Think about it. When a rope goes completely taut on a slope like this, it means one of two things. Either the person is safely weighted against the slope, or they've fallen and are dangling over a cliff, dead weight on the line. Simon tried everything, dug deeper anchors, pulled, waited. But the longer he sat there in the freezing storm, the more one undeniable fact ate at him. If he stayed anchored to that rope, he was going to be pulled off the mountain too. This is one of those moments where mountaineering ethics turn dark. Historians still argue whether cutting a rope is murder or mercy. There are entire debates about it. Should you risk 2 lives for one, or make the gut-wrenching choice that lets one survive? I didn't know any of that was happening. All I knew was that my arms were numb, my hands barely gripping the rope, and the bitter taste of frostbite was creeping into my lips. At one point, I hallucinated that the rope was talking to me. Yep, real conversation. Something like, "Well, Joe, this is awkward. It would be funny if it weren't so horrifying." Then, the impossible. The rope went slack. A snap. Not loud. More like a sigh. A shudder through the line. And then I was falling. The world spun. The snow, the ice, the howling wind, all of it blurred into a spinning vortex of cold terror and the awful certainty that this was the end. And yet, thud. Not the thud of smashing into the bottom of a 100-foot crevasse. No, I landed on something. A shelf. A ledge. Inside the crevasse. I was alive. But for how long? That was a question the mountain would soon answer. For a moment, I didn't move. Not out of strategy, not out of caution. My brain simply refused to process what had just happened. 1 second, I was dangling over the abyss. The next, I was lying flat on my back, staring at a ceiling of shimmering blue ice that arched over me like a cathedral built by nightmares. I blinked. Once, twice, Yep, still here, still breathing, probably. Pain surged back in like a wave. My right leg, oh yeah, still very much broken. The slightest twitch made it feel like someone was jamming a hot screwdriver into my thigh. My ribs ached. My left shoulder throbbed. But I was alive. Now here's the part no one really tells you about crevasses. They aren't neat little cracks in the ice. Nope, they're massive twisting chasms carved by centuries of glacial movement. Inside, it's like standing in a giant frozen canyon walls of blue translucent ice that glow as sunlight filters through cracks and fissures far above. It's beautiful. In the same way shark teeth are beautiful stunning, but only because you know exactly how dangerous they are. And the weirdest part? It was eerily quiet. The blizzard outside became muffled, distant, like the mountain had slammed the door shut on the storm. I could hear myself breathe, could hear the drip, drip, drip of melting water somewhere deep inside the glacier. Somewhere, up above, Simon was making the most agonizing decision of his life. He couldn't see me, couldn't hear me. All he knew was that the rope had gone tight, unmoving for far too long. The snow piled higher. His anchors were failing. The pull on the rope threatened to drag him off the mountain, killing us both. So he cut it. Historians still debate whether cutting the rope was the right choice. Some argue it was a cruel betrayal. Others believe it was the only reason either of us survived at all. I can tell you this, I don't blame him. Not even a little. But at that moment, lying there in the icy gut of the mountain, all I knew was that I was completely, utterly alone. I sat up, sort of, propped myself against the icy wall. My headlamp flickered, but stayed alive barely. I scanned the cavern. The walls were smooth, polished by centuries of moving ice. They curved inward, at the top narrowing toward a jagged slit where daylight filtered through like a cruel joke. Way, way out of reach. No obvious way out. Brilliant. For a moment, panic gnawed at me. The rational part of my brain tried to make a list of options. It was a very short list. Sit here, freeze, die. Do something. I chose option 2, mostly out of spite. Dragging myself upright felt like trying to assemble IKEA furniture with no hands, no instructions, and everything on fire. I gritted my teeth and scanned the floor. About 10 feet away, the floor dropped again, a deep, dark hole leading further into the glacier. Normally, going deeper into a crevasse isn't a great survival strategy, but looking up wasn't much better. There was no way I was climbing the sheer, overhanging walls with one leg. Gravity had made that decision for me. Here's a strange fact. Scientists discovered that glaciers sometimes have subglacial rivers flowing under them, cutting tunnels and shafts through the ice. So, yeah, my survival plan basically boiled down to hoping I could find one of those natural ice highways, and that it didn't lead straight into an underground lake. Fantastic plan, right? I inched toward the hole. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through my leg. My hands were numb. My lips cracked and bleeding. My beard was frozen stiff. I crawled like a wounded crab, half sliding, half flopping toward the edge. Peering down, I saw nothing. Just blackness. But the air felt different, not stale. Moving slightly could mean there was a way through, or could mean an abyss waiting to swallow me. Either way, sitting here wasn't going to save me. I tied what was left of the rope around my waist. Just a formality, really. If I fell, well, it wasn't like the rope was attached to anything, but it felt better somehow. Like a security blanket made of false hope. I shuffled over the edge and dropped. Not far. maybe 6 feet. I landed on another icy shelf, slid a bit, heart hammering, but I stopped, alive, breathing. I flicked my headlamp around. The chamber ahead narrowed into a steep tunnel sloping down into the dark. The ice shimmered in shades of blue-green and pure white, like walking inside a frozen wave. And way, way down that tunnel, I thought I saw light. Or maybe it was hypothermia messing with me. Hard to say. Historians still argue whether the human brain creates false hope as a survival instinct or if it's just a cruel trick of evolution. Either way, I leaned into it. I started crawling. Hands, elbows, drag, slide. Hands, elbows, again, over and over. At one point, I passed an ice wall with what looked like a fossil trapped inside. Some ancient plant or bug frozen for 1,000,000 years. Did you know there's a type of microscopic animal called a tardigrade that can survive being frozen in ice for decades? Yeah, tougher than me, that's for sure. The tunnel narrowed, my pack snagged. I had to strip it off, shove it ahead of me, crawl after it, then drag it forward again. My leg screamed the entire time. I started naming the pains. Thigh pain, Larry. Shoulder pain, Mo. Cracked ribs, definitely Curly. Because why not? If the mountain was going to kill me, I might as well be mildly entertained on the way down. Then, ahead, the tunnel opened. A wider chamber, sloping upward, a faint glow. Not bright, not daylight, but something. I clawed toward it, every muscle trembling, every nerve firing. My breath ragged, my vision swimming. And then I saw it. A slope. An ice ramp leading maybe toward the surface. Maybe. Or maybe toward something much worse. There's a very specific kind of dread that creeps in when you realize your life depends on whether a random chunk of ice decides to hold together for a few more hours. That's exactly what hit me as I stared up at the sloping ice ramp ahead. It looked possible. Not promising. Not safe, but possible. The ramp wasn't smooth. It was a jagged, tilted mess of compacted snow chunks of broken ice and thin blue sheets slick enough to make a penguin nervous. At the top, maybe 50 feet up, was a narrow slit where light filtered through soft, muted, but definitely daylight. Or at least, I hoped it was daylight. Could have been some cruel optical illusion cooked up by the glacier just to mess with me. Did I have another option? Absolutely not. Either I climbed that slope or I stayed here in the frozen belly of this mountain until I became a permanent exhibit titled Frozen Idiot 1985. I tightened the scraps of rope around my waist. Not that it was going to do anything. Honestly, it was just me pretending to have control over something. The human brain loves little rituals like that. It's like pressing the elevator button twice because the first press obviously didn't count. I jammed the ends of my ice axe into a crack in the slope and hauled myself upward, one-legged, half-crawling, half-flopping, like some badly designed walrus. The surface was rock hard. My hand slipped. My broken leg dragged behind, catching on everything. Each time, it bumped a chunk of ice, a white-hot jolt of pain exploded through me. I gritted my teeth so hard, I'm genuinely surprised I didn't crack a molar. Just a little higher, Joe. Just a bit more. I didn't know who I was talking to. Myself. The mountain. God. Honestly, anyone who was listening. Halfway up, my left crampon slipped. My whole body lurched. My chest hit the slope. I clawed at the ice, gasping. For a terrifying moment, I started sliding backward. No. I swung the ice axe wildly. It caught on a small ledge. My body jerked out to a stop. I lay there panting, my face pressed into the ice, whispering every swear word I could remember. Whispering because if I shouted, the mountain might hear and decide to finish the job. Here's a charming historical fact to lighten the mood during the Victorian era. Explorers genuinely believed that mountains were alive, breathing, watching, judging. Honestly, not sure they were entirely wrong. I glanced up. The slit of light was closer now, maybe 15 feet. I hauled, slid, hauled. My gloves shredded against the ice, blood mixed with the frost. I didn't care. And then, my head poked through the gap. Bright, blindingly bright. A sky. Not blue cloudy gray, swirling with snow, but open sky. I was out. Kind of. I hauled the rest of my body up and tumbled onto the surface. It wasn't solid ground, just the upper lip of the glacier. A broken, windswept field of snow and ice that stretched in every direction like an alien planet. I lay there for a long moment staring at the sky, blinking. Half laughing, half sobbing. Probably both. I don't even remember. The wind hit me like a slap. Welcome back to the blizzard, Joe. Glad you made it. Temperature. Oh, probably negative a lot. Visibility. Maybe 100 feet on a good blink, but I was out of the crevasse. Problem is, now what? Base camp was miles away. My legs still broken. My body wrecked. And let's not forget the charming labyrinth of glacier fields between me and anything remotely resembling safety. Historians still debate whether survival instincts are hardwired or if humans are just incredibly stubborn animals. I can confirm it's definitely both. I pulled myself upright as best I could. Couldn't stand, obviously. So I sat, looked around, tried to get my bearings. Everywhere I looked was just white. Endless white. No sign of Simon. No sign of base camp. No sign of anything except snow wind and the occasional ominous rumble of distant avalanches. At some point, my brain did what it always does in moments of intense stress. It threw up a completely useless fact. Did you know the longest recorded glacier in the world is the Lambert Glacier in Antarctica? It's over 250 miles long. Yep, I'm basically crawling on the beginner version of that. Helpful, right? Thanks, brain. I realized my best shot was to head toward the lower slopes. The glacier sloped away in one direction. I figured that was as good a guess as any. Going up seemed like a bad idea for obvious reasons. I started crawling. Hands, elbows, drag the useless leg. Repeat. It was awful. The surface wasn't flat. It was a minefield of snow bridges, thin crusts of snow, covering hidden crevasses. Step wrong, and you punch through into another icy tomb. I tested each patch of snow with the ice axe before moving. Sometimes it held. Sometimes it collapsed under my weight, and I had to scramble backward, gasping heart-hammering. Each movement felt slower, harder. My body was burning calories I didn't have. My water was gone. My mouth was so dry, it felt like chewing sandpaper. And the cold, oh, the cold. It wasn't just something you felt on your skin. It seeped into your bones, into your thoughts. It whispered, just lie down. Just sleep. It'll be easier. But I knew what that was. That wasn't rest. That was the voice of hypothermia, the last gentle invitation before the end. I ignored it, or tried to. Then somewhere ahead, a ridge, a dip in the glacier. Maybe a way down. Or maybe just another dead end. Either way, it was my next destination. So I kept crawling, one miserable, painful, impossible yard at a time. There's a certain point where pain stops feeling like pain and starts feeling dull, heavy, like you're dragging around someone else's body. That's where I was now. The agony in my leg, the burning in my hands, the ripping ache in my ribs, it was all still there. But my brain was filing it under background noise. because survival had become one simple task: crawl. Just crawl. I pulled myself inch by inch across the glacier, dragging my shattered leg behind like it was an annoying suitcase with a busted wheel. My gloves were shredded. Skin. Yeah, probably shredded too. Couldn't feel it anymore. Couldn't feel much of anything except the biting cold and the constant haunting crunch of ice under my elbows. At one point, I glanced back, nothing but a crooked trail in the snow behind me, like some wounded animal had dragged itself this way. A brutal little reminder that no one was following. No one was coming. If I didn't make it out, then I didn't make it out. I laughed. Couldn't help it. Not a sane laugh, mind you, more like the sound someone makes when they've run out of options, hope, and probably a fair bit of common sense. And that's when the glacier played its next trick, a hollow crunch under my left arm. The snow caved just a little. I froze. Didn't breathe. Tapped the ground ahead with my ice axe. Solid. Shifted weight slightly. Whump! The snow gave way beneath my hip. A crack opened maybe a foot wide, stretching left and right, yawning into darkness. Another crevasse. I scrambled backward, clawing at the ice heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My broken leg dragged uselessly across the crack, the tip of my boot dangling over empty space. Well, that's comforting. Did you know some crevasses are over 150 feet deep and only a couple of feet wide? Narrow enough that you don't see them until you're literally sitting on top of one. Entire rescue teams have fallen into ones just like this, never to be seen again. Glaciers are like that. Gorgeous on the surface. Nightmare underneath. I shifted further back. The crack stabilized. Held. For now. This was going to be a very long day. I scanned the horizon, or what passed for a horizon in a blizzard. Somewhere far ahead was the edge of the glacier. Beyond that, the moraine, a field of broken rocks and boulders left behind as the glacier recedes. If I could reach that, maybe, just maybe, I could find base camp. But first, I had to survive this frozen death maze. The crawling continued. Hands, elbows, drag, test the snow. Repeat. A voice popped into my head, my own voice, but weirdly sarcastic. Oh, this is a great vacation idea, Joe. Peru glaciers. What could possibly go wrong? Somewhere in the crawl. Time stopped meaning anything. Could have been 10 minutes. Could have been 3 hours. The storm started easing just a little. Enough that the world wasn't pure white static anymore. Shapes started forming in the distance. Ridges, hills of ice, and then, oh sweet mercy, a slope. Not up, down. Down was good. Down meant closer to the valley floor, closer to rocks, dirt, and life. Historians still debate whether Ciudad Grande's glacier field is one of the most dangerous in the Andes or just one of the most misunderstood. Honestly, sitting there looking at it, I figured it was both. Gorgeous, lethal, and stubbornly indifferent to whether I lived or died. I started crawling toward the slope. It wasn't smooth. No, that would have been far too kind. It was broken, scattered with hidden crevasses and soft snow bridges. But the general direction down, that was enough. Then the weird stuff started happening. First, I thought I heard music. Not mountain sounds, actual music. A strange, upbeat tune. Tinny, repetitive. What? I muttered. I paused, listened. There it was again. Music. Weird, cheesy pop music. Faint, like it was coming from a cheap radio in another room. No radios up here. No people. Just me. I realized then I was hallucinating. Cool. Great. That's what I needed. Open academic debates still linger about whether extreme stress triggers specific types of hallucinations or whether it's more random. Whatever the cause, I now had a soundtrack to my suffering, not the epic orchestral score you'd hope for, more like some awful elevator music on a loop. The music faded, replaced by voices, muffled, distant. I spun around, scanning the glacier. No one. Nothing. "Simon," I croaked. Nothing answered. I knew logically that Simon was gone. He'd probably made it back to base camp by now, assuming I was dead. And honestly, I didn't blame him. I'd have thought the same. The slope ahead steepened. I shuffled to the edge, peered down. It was rough, an avalanche chute, covered in debris, rocks, and broken ice. But it was solid. No more snow bridges. No more crevasses. Down there was freedom, or at least a better class of suffering. I started crawling again, dragging myself into the chute. Each bump sent shocks through my ribs, my leg, my entire spine. But gravity was finally on my side for once. The slope pulled me downward, faster than I intended. Sometimes I slid outright, bouncing over rocks, cursing the entire time. But every brutal jolt brought me closer. Closer to the moraine, closer to the edge of the glacier, closer to out. Then I saw it, a strip of dark. Rocks. Dirt. The edge of the ice. I was almost off the glacier. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to cry. But all that came out was this pathetic, broken chuckle. Half delirium, half relief. I flopped forward, dragging myself inch by painful inch toward that precious line where ice turned to earth. Where the mountain stopped trying to kill me directly and switched to a more passive-aggressive approach. I was close, so close. But whether I'd actually make it out, that was still very much in question. Crawling off the glacier felt like escaping a monster's mouth, except the monster had just decided to chew slower. The ice faded behind me, replaced by rocks. Jagged, ugly rocks, scattered like broken teeth across the moraine. You'd think touching solid ground would have brought relief. It didn't. Turns out, crawling across shattered stone with a broken leg is just a different flavor of awful. No more slipping into bottomless crevasses, no. Now it was all about tearing my knees open on razor-sharp boulders and slamming my ribs into rocks that felt like they were purpose-built for suffering. But at least I wasn't going to fall into the earth anymore. I was officially out of the glacier's death maze. Small win. Gold star. I dragged myself forward, looking for anything that could help. A landmark. A trail. A miracle vending machine. Spoiler, found none of those. Instead, what I found was the overwhelming sense that I might be moving in the wrong direction. The landscape ahead looked unfamiliar. Harsh cliffs to the left. A dry gully to the right. Endless rock in every other direction. "Are you kidding me?" I muttered out loud. Because of course, I was talking to myself by this point. Who else was going to listen? A debate still rages among mountaineering historians about whether climbers are better off following river gullies down valleys or sticking to ridgelines. Gullies are usually easier on broken limbs, but risk rockfall. Ridges are safer from falling rocks, but brutal to navigate. Guess what? I had neither. Just chaos. The hallucinations returned. First, it was the music again, something painfully annoying. Not majestic or inspiring, mind you. It sounded like a broken ice cream truck, crossed with a tiny 80s synth pop hit. Then voices, chattering, laughter. Somewhere behind me. I spun, or as close to spinning as someone with a shattered leg can get. Nothing. No one. "Simon," I whispered. Silence. Then, a shadow flickered across the rocks. I tensed. Looked again. Nothing. Just wind, tossing snow over the cliffs. But I swore for a split second I saw a person. Someone walking away from me. "Wait, hey," I croaked, but my throat was cracked dry. almost useless. It hit me then. My water was gone, had been for hours. And that was bad, really bad. Dehydration at this altitude, in this cold, hits differently. Your mouth dries out until even swallowing feels like sandpaper. Your brain starts to glitch. Short circuits. That's probably why the next thing happened. I became convinced, absolutely 100% convinced, that there was a small yellow camp tent just over the next rise. Couldn't see it directly, but I knew it was there. I pulled myself toward it. Hands, elbows dragging the useless leg behind, over and over. Breath ragged. Vision swimming. I was so sure that if I could just crest the next hill, someone would be there. Maybe Simon, maybe Richard, the guy minding our base camp, or maybe some Peruvian herder casually sipping tea while wondering why some British lunatic was crawling through his backyard. The hill crested. I looked. Nothing. Just more rocks, more wind, more emptiness. And it broke me a little. I dropped my head to the ground, gasped. The cold wasn't just cold anymore. It was deep now. In my bones, my fingertips, my spine. Every instinct screamed, lie down, just sleep, rest. Did you know that many people who freeze to death are found with their clothes partly removed? It's called paradoxical undressing. Your body gets so cold, it tricks you into thinking you're overheating. Just one of hypothermia's many charming side effects. I felt that creeping in. Not the undressing, thankfully, but the bone-deep exhaustion. That heavy, syrupy kind of tired that whispers, "It's okay. You've tried. No one's gonna blame you." I shut my eyes. Just for a moment, a memory hit me. Sitting in my flat, back in England, bragging to friends about this trip. Yeah, Sula Grande. Pretty remote. Pretty wild. But we've got it planned. We know what we're doing. Smug idiot. No, not like this. I forced my head up, forced my arms to move. My elbows screamed, my ribs screamed. Honestly, my entire body was one giant scream, muted only by sheer stubbornness. Another ridge ahead. I dragged, pulled, slid, and then a change. The rocks shifted from jagged boulders to gravel. Easier to slide over. The ground angled slightly downward. A gully, maybe. Or an old runoff path. I followed it. Minutes, hours. No idea. Time stopped meaning anything. Then something insane. Footprints. Actual human footprints in the gravel. For a moment, I genuinely thought it was another hallucination. Crawled forward. Reached out. Touched them. Real. Someone had walked here recently. Adrenaline hit me like a shot of electricity. I scrambled after them. Well scrambled, as best someone can with one working leg and hands worn to the bone. The path curved around a bend, and suddenly voices. Not hallucinations this time. Real. Muffled but real. I tried to shout. Help! Came out as a whisper. A broken, croaking whisper. I slammed my fist against a rock. Tried again. Help! Nothing. I could see them now. Two figures. Far ahead. Walking. Turning toward camp, maybe. They weren't looking my way. My voice wouldn't carry. But if I could just get closer. I clawed at the ground. Closer and closer. Don't let them leave. Don't let them walk away. Not now. Not when I'm this close. I dragged myself over the last little hump of gravel and broken rock, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the wind. The two figures were still ahead, moving, chatting, completely unaware that a barely alive human disaster was crawling toward them like some half-frozen cryptid. Hey, I croaked. Nothing. My throat was a desert. I slapped a rock. Tried again. Help. Hey. Still barely a whisper. I waved an arm. Weak. Clumsy. Pathetic. No reaction. Panic surged. Not the full screaming kind. No. I was too far gone for that. This was the quiet, suffocating kind, the realization that I could actually die now. Not from the mountain, not from the fall, but from being so close to salvation and too broken to reach it. The cruel irony didn't escape me. I dragged myself faster. Hands, elbows dragging my shattered leg through the dirt, scraping it raw. Couldn't care less. Pain was just part of the background music now. Don't let them leave. Don't let them leave. The figures paused at the edge of a rock formation base camp, maybe. My brain was too fogged to recognize it clearly. They adjusted something, then started walking. Walking away. No, I gasped. No, no, no. I slammed my fist against the ground. Look at me. My voice barely carried past my own ears. I needed sound, noise, anything. I fumbled in my jacket, half delirious, pulling out. Nothing useful. My gloves were in tatters. My pack had been ditched hours ago. I had rocks. Fine. Rocks it is. I grabbed one, hurled it not far. My arm barely had the strength to chuck it 3 feet. It bounced off a bigger stone with a sad little thunk. Useless. Then another rock. Threw it. It skittered down the slope. Louder this time. One of the figures stopped. Looked around. Come on. Come on. Then the other stopped too. They turned facing my direction. I waved both arms weak and jerky. Over here, I whispered. Look. Just look. And one of them pointed. Straight at me. For a heartbeat, I wasn't sure if it was real. But then the figure jogged forward a few steps. Hesitant. Unsure. Then running. They ran toward me. Joe. Joe. Oh my God. It's Joe. It was Simon. His face complete disbelief and horror. Pale as a ghost. Holy. Holy. He's alive. He's alive. Richard came running right behind him, wide-eyed, frozen for half a second before bolting into action. I collapsed completely. Every last bit of strength left me. My arms gave out. My head hit the gravel. Simon dropped beside me, gripping my shoulder. Joe, mate, I thought you were gone. I wanted to say something cool, something witty, maybe a sarcastic, miss me. But all that came out was this weird broken laugh, and then a sob. Didn't even know which one it was. Both, probably. Simon shook his head, stunned. How did you get here? I couldn't even answer. Just closed my eyes. Felt hands lifting me, pulling me toward camp. Here's the wild thing. There was still no guarantee I'd survive. My leg was a disaster. I was hypothermic, dehydrated, half delirious. Infection, almost a certainty. But none of that mattered in that moment, because I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't alone. Did you know that the human brain is wired to survive loneliness almost as desperately as it survives physical threats? Studies show that isolation triggers the same pain centers in the brain as physical injury. Honestly, makes sense. I remember snippets being dragged into the tent, hands pressing a mug of something hot against my lips. Soup, maybe. Water. Could have been motor oil, I wouldn't have noticed. Simon rambling. We were gonna leave. We were literally packing up. We thought you were dead. Richard kept shaking his head. Jesus. I don't even. How? Me, I was mostly horizontal, shivering uncontrollably, every muscle spasming, my leg pulsing with a sick, deep ache that I just knew was infection setting in. But I was alive. Historians still debate whether what happened next counts as a proper rescue. There was no helicopter, no search and rescue team. Just 2 guys, a battered tent, and a decision drag Joe down the rest of the mountain, or leave him and go get help. Spoiler, we went with Drag Joe. The next hours, maybe days blurred. They rigged a makeshift stretcher, hauled me over rocks, down ridges, across freezing rivers that bit into my bones worse than anything I'd ever felt. Every bump sent a lightning bolt of pain up my spine. Every slip felt like it might shatter me completely. And yet I laughed. Swear to God, I laughed. Because after everything, the fall, the crevasse, the hallucinations, I was still here. Somehow. At one point, Simon deadpanned, "Well, mate, next time you pick the holiday." "Yeah," I rasped back. "Beach. Definitely the beach." Because gallows humor is the only sane response when you've spent days being personally hunted by a mountain. As we slogged down the valley, I caught glimpses, clouds lifting just enough to show Ciula Grande towering behind us. The same mountain that had tried so hard to kill me. It wasn't angry, wasn't cruel, wasn't anything. Just there, unmoved, uncaring, beautiful, terrifying, and somehow still worth it. If I thought crawling off the glacier was bad, being hauled down the rest of the mountain on a makeshift stretcher was like volunteering for a demolition derby where I was the car. Simon and Richard fashioned the stretcher from aluminum poles rope and bits of canvas. Honestly, it looked about as sturdy as a wet noodle. Simon gave it a once-over, squinted, and deadpanned. "It'll probably kill you faster than the mountain." "Sounds efficient," I croaked. They chuckled, I think. Or maybe I hallucinated that part. Hard to tell at this point. Dragging me wasn't simple. The route back to civilization wasn't some gentle trail with lovely signposts that said "injured climbers this way." No, it was a relentless gauntlet of jagged rocks, steep drops, muddy slopes, and ice-cold rivers that didn't care one bit about my shattered leg or our collective will to survive. Every time the stretcher hit a rock, and it hit a lot of rocks, a fresh bolt of pain exploded through my leg, my ribs, my entire spine. At one point, I actually envied the skeletons of medieval plague victims. At least they weren't conscious for it. Did you know the Incas built a vast network of trails across the Andes stretching over 25,000 miles? They were geniuses of mountain logistics. Tragically, none of those trails passed anywhere near where we were. Because of course not. Simon gritted his teeth, shoulders shaking under the weight. "Mate, you are heavier than you look." "Bones of steel," I rasped. "Solid muscle. Pure. Suffering." Richard panted, face red, hands raw. "You better write a book about this." "Yeah, and it's gonna be terrible." The gallows humor kept us going. Kind of. We hit a river crossing about an hour later. Calling it a river was generous. It was more like a freezing death trench, filled with water, the temperature of liquid regret. Simon tested it. The current snarled at him. "Great," he muttered. "Perfect. No bridge, no logs. Just wait it, with me, on a stretcher." I stared at the water and muttered, "If I fall in, just let the river have me." Simon snorted, "Not a chance, mate. We've come too far." They tied ropes around themselves, hoisted the stretcher, and stepped into the torrent. The water hit their thighs, then their waists. The current shoved against them, like it was personally offended by our presence. Simon slipped once, just a step, but enough to tilt the stretcher sideways. My broken leg dunked into the river. I screamed. Loud, couldn't help it. The cold hit me like a hammer. It wasn't just freezing, it was painful. Like knives stabbing every nerve. Hang on," Simon shouted. They steadied, pushed forward, dragging me through. Water sloshed over me, soaking every bit of clothing that wasn't already wet. By the time we hit the opposite bank, I was shaking so violently it felt like my teeth might shatter. They set me down on the rocks. I gasped, coughed, swore creatively under my breath. Richard fumbled for something in the kit, dry socks maybe, or more likely just moral support. Simon sat back panting. "We are, officially, never doing this again." "Beach holiday," I rasped. We agreed. Simon chuckled. "Yeah, beach. with pina coladas. No crampons allowed. Despite the pain, the shaking, the sheer absurdity of our situation, I felt something crack open inside me, a realization, a strange, stubborn sense of joy, because I was still alive. Somehow, historians still debate whether the drive to survive is a biological imperative or something more mysterious, some spark of consciousness that refuses to go quietly. Sitting there half broken on a riverbank in Peru, I was starting to think, maybe it's both. The landscape shifted as we moved. The high alpine terrain slowly gave way to scraggly hills dotted with hardy shrubs. Snow faded into patches. The air, while still frigid, wasn't quite the icy razor it had been. Birds appeared tiny specks flitting between rocks. Life. Actual signs of life. At one point, Richard paused, staring into the distance. Smoke, he said. Simon squinted. Yeah, that's smoke. A village, maybe. Or a herder's camp. Either way, it meant people. Civilization, I whispered mostly to myself. Or, at least, whatever passes for it out here. Motivation surged. Simon and Richard redoubled their efforts. The stretcher scraped over rocks. My leg throbbed in rhythm with each jolt, but I didn't care. Not anymore. We crested a hill, and there it was, a cluster of huts. Simple thatched roof buildings. People moving about. Cooking fires. Dogs barking. I nearly cried. Richard bolted ahead, waving, shouting in broken Spanish. Villagers turned, saw him, saw Simon behind, saw me. A murmur rippled through the camp. People hurried forward. Some pointed. A few gasped. Someone yelled for water. Another ran toward us with a blanket. In moments, I was surrounded, hands grabbing the stretcher, lifting it, steadying it, ushering us into the village. Warmth hit me, not actual heat, but the warmth of human presence, of voices, of life. A woman pressed a cup to my lips, hot sweet tea, laced with something herbal. I gulped it, scalding my tongue, not caring. Simon dropped to his knees, exhausted beyond words. Richard sat back, head in his hands, shaking with adrenaline relief, disbelief. I caught Simon's eye. You didn't leave me, I whispered. He shook his head. Never crossed my mind. It did, for both of us. We knew it did, but it didn't matter anymore. I was here. We were here. The fight wasn't over. Hospitals were still far away. Surgery, infection, the slow, painful road back to anything resembling normal life. But for the first time in days, I wasn't crawling. I was home, or something close to it. You'd think the worst was over by now, right? Out of the glacier, out of the mountains, wrapped in blankets, sipping questionable tea brewed by kindly villagers. But no. Turns out, when you've shattered your leg, been hypothermic, dehydrated, hallucinating, and dragged down a mountain, on what basically amounts to a taco shell made of canvas and pipe, you're not out of the woods yet, not even close. The nearest hospital, a mere 80 miles away, on dirt roads, in a truck that looked like it had last been serviced somewhere around the Spanish Inquisition. A few villagers loaded me into the back of it, flatbed, open air, no suspension. The bed was lined with hay, which honestly didn't help much, unless the goal was to make me smell like a barn for the next decade. Simon climbed in beside me, bracing my leg as best he could with a few more splints cobbled together from trekking poles and rope. Richard sat up front, squished between the driver and what I assumed was the local mechanic slash priest slash village philosopher. The engine coughed to life, barely, then rumbled forward, jolting like a roller coaster designed by someone who deeply hated bones. The road was ambitious. That's the best word I've got for it. A winding, rutted mess of gravel mud and the occasional outright cliff. Every bump was a fresh slice of agony. At one point, the entire truck tilted sideways around a curve so sharply that I half prepared to just fall out and let gravity finish the job. Did you know that the highest navigable road in the world is in Bolivia, peaking at over 18,000 feet? This wasn't that road. But if someone told me it was designed by the same sadistic engineer, I'd believe it. We rattled on for hours. Dust clouds swallowed the truck. The wind was cold, but not mountain death cold anymore. Somewhere along the ride, I dozed off. Not sleep exactly. More like a blackout. My body just hit the emergency shutoff switch. When I came to, the truck had stopped. A small town. Not much, just a handful of adobe buildings, a dusty plaza, and what passed for a medical clinic. They carried me inside. A man in a white coat looked me over, wide-eyed, horrified. He poked at my leg, muttered things in Spanish I thankfully didn't understand, then jabbed a needle into my arm. Painkillers, sweet, beautiful, merciful painkillers. Everything softened. The edges blurred. For the first time in days, weeks, a lifetime. The fire in my leg dulled to a simmer. Simon leaned over. "Joe, ambulance coming. Getting you to Lima." "Great," I slurred. "Tell him, bring snacks." He laughed, a tired, broken laugh. "Yeah, mate, I'll make sure they do." The ambulance arrived sometime later. An actual ambulance, this time not a farm truck with ambition. They loaded me in. I barely remember the ride. Just flashes, lights, sirens, Simon's face fading in and out. Someone adjusting the IV line. At one point, I woke up mid-ride and asked the medic, "Am I dead?" He chuckled. "No, senor, not yet." Comforting. Hours later, we rolled into Lima. A real hospital. Fluorescent lights, white walls. The smell of antiseptic so strong it could punch a hole through your soul. Doctors swarmed. X-rays, more needles, more questions. The surgeon walked in, took one look at the leg, and visibly winced. "Complicated," he muttered. "Very complicated." "No kidding. Here's your odd fact for the day. Titanium. The metal often used for surgical pins and rods and broken bones is highly resistant to corrosion, including seawater. Meaning if I ever went scuba diving post-surgery, my leg would be more durable than most ship hulls. The surgery was long, complex. They pieced my leg back together like the world's worst jigsaw puzzle. Plates, screws, rods. I joked later that I was part man, part hardware store. When I woke, Simon was there, sitting in a plastic chair looking like he hadn't slept since the mountain decided to eat me. He grinned. "You survived." Not sure how I whispered. Neither of us really knew. Even now, people still argue about it. Historians, mountaineers, psychologists. Whether it was skill, luck, stubbornness, or just the refusal to die lying down. But here's the thing. This wasn't just my survival story. It was Simon's too. The man who lowered me down that mountain inch by inch until the mountain gave him no choice but to cut me loose. The man who thought he'd killed me. Who sat at camp, devastated, sure he'd never see me again. And yet, here we were, sitting in a hospital in Lima. Alive, barely, but alive. I lay there staring at the ceiling, realizing something strange. I'd touched the void, stared right into it, and the void, well, it blinked first. Recovery wasn't some glorious, inspirational montage. No triumphant music. No quick time skips with dramatic crossfades. Nope. Recovery was painfully slow, monotonous, a tedious grind of needles, bandages, bedpans, and the delightful sensation of metal rods holding my leg together while the rest of me tried not to fall apart. The doctors in Lima were incredible. They patched me back into something vaguely resembling a functioning human. But they also didn't sugarcoat it. "This will take months," one of them said, tapping my x-ray with the back of his pen. "Maybe a year before you can walk properly, if you're lucky." I nodded, lying there with tubes in my arms, feeling like a broken action figure someone had unsuccessfully tried to glue back together. Simon stayed. Longer than he needed to. Longer than anyone would have expected. I don't think either of us could face the idea of being alone just yet. He visited every day. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we didn't. Just sat there. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence only people who've shared something unspeakably awful can fully understand. Did you know that the human body has 206 bones, and breaking the tibia, the shin bone, is one of the most common and painful fractures? Yeah. Learned that firsthand. Bonus fun fact, the tibia is also one of the slowest bones to heal, especially when it's been, snapped clean in half on a Peruvian glacier. The hospital food was predictably awful. I hallucinated cheeseburgers daily. Simon Saint, that he has smuggled in snacks. He even managed to find a chocolate bar, at one point half melted crushed, probably expired. Best thing I ever tasted. At one point, Simon grinned and asked, "So, when do we climb again?" I laughed so hard, it nearly dislocated my ribs. "Yeah, mate, right after the beach holiday. Top priority." There was still guilt between us. Of course there was. Simon cutting the rope. Well, that wasn't something either of us would ever fully get past. Not in the blame sense. I never blamed him. But the reality of it, the sheer awfulness of having to make that choice, yeah, that lingers. Historians still debate whether mountaineering ethics demand unconditional loyalty or practical survival. Entire books are written about it. Panels at climbing conventions, podcasts, lectures. But here's the thing, the mountain doesn't care about any of that. It doesn't care about ethics, or heroism, or guilt. The mountain simply is. Weeks later, I was stable enough to fly back to the UK. Wheelchair, crutches, the full disaster tourist package. The airline staff tried very hard not to ask questions, though I'm pretty sure one flight attendant whispered, "How is this guy even alive?" as they strapped me into my seat. Back home, the real work began. Physical therapy, more surgeries, months of exercises that felt like medieval torture, but slightly less fun. Learning to walk again wasn't some big movie moment. It was me in a sterile rehab room gripping parallel bars, sweating buckets, teeth-gritted leg trembling like a spaghetti noodle in an earthquake. Some days I wanted to quit. Some days I stared at the floor, convinced I wouldn't make it back to anything even close to normal. But then I'd remember crawling over that glacier, pulling myself across rock's snow ice. Remember thinking, if I stop, I die. And suddenly, standing for 10 seconds didn't seem so bad. Friends came by. Some were supportive. Some were weirdly awkward, as if they didn't quite know what to say to someone who had literally stared death in the face and walked well-crawled away from it. Oddly enough, one of the most common questions was, "Are you done climbing now?" Fair question. And the answer, "Assad." Because as much as that mountain tried to kill me, as much as the void opened up beneath me, it didn't win. There's something about mountaineering that gets under your skin. The silence, the beauty, the terrifying smallness of yourself against something so vast, so utterly indifferent. It strips away everything else, all the noise, the stress, the nonsense of regular life, and leaves you with one simple truth. Existence is fragile, and somehow, that makes it beautiful. Here's a final weird fact for you. Scientists still debate whether high-risk adventures like mountaineering trigger something deep in our evolutionary wiring. A need to test limits, a craving for meaning through survival. Or maybe humans are just a little bit broken in a very specific, wonderful way. Simon and I, we stayed friends, lifelong friends, bound together by an experience that defies explanation. We climbed again, smaller stuff at first, but eventually, yeah, we went back, not to Ciula Grande. That chapter was closed. Touched the void once. No need to flirt with it twice, but mountains still called. They always would. And as for that void, I saw it, faced it, laughed at it, and walked away. So, that's my story. The story of how a broken leg, an endless glacier, and a whole lot of really bad decisions somehow didn't kill me. Not for lack of trying, though. The mountain gave it a pretty good shot. If there's anything to take away from this, maybe it's this: we're all a lot tougher than we think. The void, whatever form it takes in your life, feels huge, feels final, feels impossible. But sometimes you crawl. You drag yourself forward, inch by miserable inch, and one day you look back and realize you made it. Not because it was easy, not because you were brave every second, but because you didn't stop. You just kept moving. The mountain didn't care whether I lived or died. The wind, the snow, the ice, they didn't care either. Nature isn't cruel, it's just indifferent. It's us who give it meaning. Us who decide whether the story ends with a fall or with getting back up. I'm glad you were here to hear this. Really. Thanks for sticking around. I hope, wherever you are, whatever mountain you're facing, literal or otherwise, you remember this. You're stronger than you think. Now, take a breath, close your eyes, and let this story drift away. Like snow on the wind, fading, soft, silent.